Welcome back to more of Vanilla Swirl developer commentary with Dr. Brian Dorgon 111 as your host, and I will be talking more about the design and philosophy of the map. And the first topic for today that we'll hop right into is custom mobs. The short version is I did not use any custom mobs in Vanilla Swirl CTM. Forgot from the previous episode, I still have things on peaceful difficulty, so nothing is spawning. But all of the mobs that I spawn are completely vanilla mobs, and so if I spawn a cave spider, it's just a cave spider. If I spawn a witch, it's just a witch. If I spawn a blaze, it's just a blaze. Nevertheless, you may have noticed that a lot of the mobs have armor. It'll be easier to see in an area with a bunch of zombies, so let me go to one of those. I'm over here in the purple dungeon now. I've turned mob spawns down, or mob sounds down, because there's tons of mobs and it would get too loud otherwise. And if we look around in here, I see a zombie who spawned in some leather armor. There's a skeleton wearing some pants. I saw a skeleton with an enchanted bow earlier. And these are all just natural spawns. I'm just having spawners that spawn zombies or skeletons, but I take advantage of local difficulty in this map. If we take a look at the F3 screen, and I do this, you can see my mouse. Over here it says the local difficulty, 3.51/0.76. And if I fly over here, kind of like out into the cave, away from the actual portion of the dungeon, you will see that local difficulty over here is just 2.01, day 33. And basically what's going on here, local difficulty is something that chunk by chunk shows the relative difficulty of an area of the map and affects what portion of zombies and skeletons are going to be wearing armor, and whether or not zombies will be able to pick up loot. That's another thing. As you kill zombies, like they'll be dropping occasionally pieces of gold armor, and then, you know, if you kill a zombie with a bow at range and he drops some gold armor, the next zombie might pick it up and then start wearing that armor. And so you'll see a lot of armored mobs as a result of that. But basically, throughout the map, I use different values of local difficulty depending upon whether you're in a dungeon area or not. And so over here, I see the local difficulty is 3.51, and that's because the redstone path right below this dungeon is going right through here, whereas over here there aren't any dungeon elements. And so basically, throughout the map, wherever there is a dungeon, I go and increase the local difficulty of those chunks so that the mobs that get spawned, even though I'm just spawning skeletons, are more likely to be skeletons with enchanted bows who are wearing armor because of the higher value of local difficulty. In terms of the variety of mobs that one finds in Vanilla Swirl CTM, I used most mobs, but didn't use all of them. I don't have any wither skeletons, guardians, magma cubes, electrified creepers, or bosses like Wither, Elder Guardian, or the Ender Dragon. And mostly that was just because they either didn't seem appropriate for the overworld or I didn't find a good way to fit them in. It could be good to add some of those. I mentioned how I'm only using vanilla mobs and don't use any custom mobs. It's a real trade-off. I find that a lot of CTM maps, custom mobs can add some flavor when you have, you know, like zombies that are wearing, you know, like colorful leather chest pieces and have certain, you know, potion effects and have name tags and drop certain loot and different types of things. That can be interesting for kind of varying up an area. But I feel like in general, CTM maps kind of overdo it with that kind of custom mob kind of stuff. And as this was my first CTM map, and there are a million things to juggle to try to balance the map, that was one that I didn't want to have to think about at all. And so I just decided that I was not going to use any custom mobs. Everything was going to be completely vanilla mobs. So if you see a zombie, you know it's a normal zombie. It's got normal hit points. If it happens to spawn with some armor, obviously it'll have some extra defense as a result of that. But there's no, you know, nothing fishy going on with the mobs, which I think also makes things a little bit easier on the player. Sometimes you have CTM maps and you go into a new area and there's like some crazy mob with a name tag and crazy armor and jump boost and speed, and until you fought a few of them, you kind of like don't know how to figure them out. And so yeah, I try not to surprise the player with that. It's all just kind of vanilla mobs. However, the trade-off there is because of the fact that it's vanilla mobs, that's also one of the reasons that there's so much kind of spawner spam, especially towards the latter portions of the map in the purple dungeon and to some extent in the mountain peak. there's just a lot of spawners, and it's because if you're just using vanilla mobs and the player's starting to get good gear, the only way that you can try to, slow down and try to kill the player is with more mobs and more mob spawners. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but basically, given the constraints that I had placed upon myself when I was first designing the map that I was going to use vanilla mobs, it basically kind of forced my hand into using a few more mob spawners than maybe would have been ideal. But yeah, despite that, I still enjoy the map, and I'm pretty pleased with how it's turned out for the May version of Vanilla Swirl maps. Next, let's talk about potions. In the starter chest of Vanilla Swirl, I tell people in one of the starter books with an overview of the map that there is no nether wart in the map and no potions are given in loot chests, which is true, and that is another constraint that I placed upon myself when trying to design the map. I feel that it's very hard to balance a map when the player gets potions and the ingredients for brewing, because there are a lot of potions that can make the player very overpowered. Even speed is a potion that can make the player quite powerful. The ability to sprint faster than the mobs is one of the main advantages that the player has in Minecraft, and the faster you can go, basically the less mobs are going to be a threat to you. And so, yeah, even something as simple as a speed potion, much less potions like strength and fire resistance and, resistance and whatnot. Yeah, it makes it really hard to balance the map when players can obtain any kind of potions that they want as a result of being able to brew their own potions. So as a result, blazes don't drop blaze rods, so you can't even try to make a potion stand, and there's no nether wart in the map, so you're not going to be brewing any of your own potions. You can still obtain potions in two ways. One is that witches still drop potions. Witch potions are not part of loot tables, so map makers can't easily change whether witches are going to drop potions, and so I haven't tried to do anything to stop you from getting potions off of witches. It's relatively straightforward to get instant healing and occasionally even a fire resist potion off of a witch if you're trying. And the other way that you can get potions is the villagers from the teleporters. So each teleporter that you unlocks a villager that has one particular potion, and they're kind of randomized in the 4 locations. But let me go unlock the teleporters, and I'll show you the 4 different villager trades. So in each corner of the map, southeast, southwest, northwest, and northeast, there's a different villager, and one of them will give you enduring strength. One of them will trade emeralds for enduring speed. One of them will trade emeralds for enduring haste. And by the way, haste increases both your attack speed as well as the speed that your pick can break blocks. Attack speed meaning how fast your weapons cool down. And one of them gives enduring health boost, which gives you 4 extra hearts. And that seems to be people's favorite, and it's the most expensive at 5 emeralds. They cost like 2, 3, 4, and 5 emeralds each. And yes, this once again, I talked in a previous episode that I want to give players leverage so that if they're less skilled players or they've died and they've lost their stuff, they have ways that they can gear up even more to make areas easier. And you can do that as a result of exploring and finding things. And so this rewards exploration. If you explore all 4 corners of the map, you can unlock all 4 teleporters and get all 4 of these villagers. While you're exploring, there's lots of random loot chests that should net you a bunch of emeralds. And then you can buy these potion buffs that last until you die or drink milk. And that's why they're called enduring potions, because they last for so long. And yeah, it's another way just to kind of buff up the player. It's the only thing I do with potions. This way I can kind of control the potions that players get. And they have to, go through a bit of effort of exploration, both to find the emeralds as well as to find the teleporters and unlock them in order to get them. But then players get that boon. Next, let's talk about the bonus monument. I was not able to, especially in a mini CTM, and I think I kind of prefer a mini CTM to a normal CTM because CTMs these days, a lot of them are super long, both to play and to watch playthroughs of for Let's Plays. A mini CTM that only has 3 objective blocks, like this one, is a little bit on the short side, but 16 full dungeons I feel like is too long, and I feel that way both as a player and as someone watching different series. I don't know, sweet spot somewhere around 6 to 8, I feel like. But in any case, nevertheless, it's kind of tradition to have 16 wolves that kind of Vex has started, and a lot of players have made 16 of, other colored things. In this case, I've got colored stained glass, but people do colored bowls and colored hardened clays. And some people, like 3-2, made the record discs, and you try to get like all 11 or 12 record discs as other type of monuments to complete. But in any case, kind of like playing up to tradition, it's nice to have 16 of something that you're going for. And the Explorer bonus monument, because I have all the different types of random loot chests hidden throughout the map, I was able to come up with 16 different types. And so on an ideal map, a number of the bonus chests are only found in certain biomes. And so you need a wide variety of biomes in order to be able to, for my algorithms, to be able to hide all of the different types of bonus chests. But yeah, I wanted to have kind of like 16 of something, and I wanted to really encourage people to go play, you know, hide and go seek in order to try to find some of these chests. They were all designed originally to be things that the player could spot normally on their own without any hints, without something like the bonus glass proximity detector. And many of the bonus chests are... There's a few that are easy to see in the daytime. There are a number of them that are easier to see at nighttime as a result of lighting cues. Sometimes when you see a lighting cue, it's something as simple as a lava pool, like it is over here. Although sometimes even the lava pools have something. But if you're traveling around at night, obviously I'm flying and the player wouldn't normally be flying. But if you're traveling around at night, there are a few different things that will give off some light and some lighting cues for hidden bonus chests. Here's one lighting cue. It's just a normal lava lake, but it actually contains a furnace kind of hidden in the side corner that has an emerald and a book and cyan stained glass, which is very nice. Here is another example of a lighting cue. I think we already saw this one in a previous episode, although it was in the daylight area. Can't see it all that much because the light is just barely peeking through the ice, but there's a little bit of light shining through here because here is a chest that contains some good loot, and I guess there's like a redstone torch below it. Yeah, that's giving off a little bit of light. So if you're just kind of coming from far away, you can see a little bit of the light peeking out through the snow. Some lighting cues are more obvious than others. Occasionally on a kind of spiky pillar of the terrain, one will find something like this where there's burning netherrack and it's just surrounding a chest. That's going to give us another one of the stained glass monument blocks, as well as some good loot. Here's another subtle lighting cue over here in the desert. A desert well is somewhat of a rare occurrence, but a desert well with some light emanating out of the bottom of it is even more rare. And sure enough, there's another one of the stained glass bonus monument chests. Not every loot chest that one's going to find at night necessarily needs a lighting cue, however. There are other clever ways to try to get people to find loot chests. And the loot chest that I implemented in the swamp is one... Let me make sure, I can't remember if I have mobs turned on. Is one that I actually implemented way back in the original alpha of this map that I had friends beta testing back in like December. And basically I thought that this was the loot chest that people were going to enjoy finding the most, but there was no kind of obvious visible sign of where it was. However, what there was a whole bunch of mobs walking around with Frostwalker boots in a certain area of the swamp. And so I'm over here. I'm going to go into... I've given myself some diamond armor and a stack of notch apples, and so now I feel confident in my ability to go into survival mode and be able to deal with any skeletons that may finally see me. But both skeletons and zombies in this area... His arrows are bouncing off me, are they not? Or has he just not managed to hit me yet? It seems quite curious. His arrows are just bouncing off of me. I don't think any of these potion effects should cause that. Is that a Minecraft bug? I haven't seen this bug before. In any case, there's all these mobs walking around. They have Frostwalker boots on. And that should hopefully clue some people in, although I've seen a number of people see the mobs in Frostwalker boots and even notice the fact... let me give myself a diamond sword. Oh, looks like we might have already gotten lucky that some of these mobs have killed off other mobs as well. But if I kill one of these guys, he's going to drop the Frostwalker boots for me. And the Frostwalker boots are 100% drop from any skeletons or zombies who are in this area and wearing the boots. And so it's likely that some of the area out here is going to be frosted. And it's also the case... I think I might have dropped my proximity detector when I was trying to get the armor out, that your proximity detector tells you that there's a chest around here and you might be looking all around and not be able to find it. But hopefully, and I was so glad that it finally happened in my playthrough with Cthulhu and Circaz, because in my playthrough with Kurt, and this was before the proximity detector and before the bonus monument had kind of like any clear way to be able to find all the different items. It was the case that we were in a swamp and we got attacked by zombies who dropped Frostwalker boots, and we put on the boots and did some walking around, but we didn't happen to stumble in this area because nothing else was directing us to go here because there was no proximity detector yet. And so we never managed to stumble upon the fact that all of a sudden if you go over here and you're wearing Frostwalker boots, there are a portion of the swamp that does not get frosted by you or by the mobs. And if you spell it out, it says dig. And if one is to dig in that spot, you will find one of the bonus monument chests with one of the bonus pieces of glass right down here. And this was definitely my favorite of all the secret loot chests that I had hidden, and I really wanted people to find it. And so this was one of the things in my playthrough with Kurt, the fact that we kind of passed by this area and we got Frostwalker boots, but Kurt didn't think it was particularly curious that there were multiple mobs with Frostwalker in this one area, and they both happened to drop the boots to, you know, cause him to think to go looking for things, and we were trying to do other things. I mean, that's fine. Most people, I mean, I've had a bunch of people play through the map even after the proximity detector who didn't go after all of the different loot chests who didn't find this. But yes, this is one that's extremely fun to find if and when you do find it. And if you dig down here, sure enough, there's a chest. It's got the red stained glass and some very nice blocks. There's more nice blocks inside these chests. And so it's one of the best loot chests hidden in the map. But yeah, someone who did find this chest tweeted at me something to the effect of, I just found the red glass hidden in vanilla Swirl CTM, and I should give you, I guess it was someone else who has a PhD, I should give you my PhD, so rather than calling you Dr. Brian, people will call you Dr. Brian. Because apparently they thought that this was very clever. The way it's implemented, if I go into spectator mode, you can kind of see them here. There are a bunch of armor stands kind of hovering over here, and there's just a command block that turns the block below the armor stands into water, even when they're frosted ice, and so it's just on a 20 hertz clock, changing those places back to water, I think. I think that's how I implemented it. And so I think actually, I hadn't really thought about this. If I try to take a bucket and empty out one of these spots, I guess it doesn't always replace it. Maybe it just replaces, it probably only turns frosted ice back into, that must be it. Can't remember exactly how I implemented it right now. Oh, can you not select frosted ice? Interesting. I'm like doing pick block and it doesn't work on the frosted ice block. So apparently you can't select that in your inventory, just like place it back down. In any case, it replaces frosted ice with water in these particular positions that are below the armor stands that you could see in spectator mode. And actually, I guess I could go and say, no, what is it I want to say? Entity data, at E, type equals armor stand, R equals 20 and a radius of 20 from me. And we'll say invisible : 0 to make them no longer be invisible. So there's the armor stands, and it just spells out dig and has the X, and so that tells you where to dig. And then the command blocks that actually implement it, let me get night vision back on by holding the fermented spider eye, are basically directly below it, I think like down in the bedrock floor of this place. Yeah, I'll talk about implementation sometime later on. I think we can't see the command block here, but the command block is basically right below it. And so anytime a player is standing in this area, the command block will be active, and all of these special armor stands, which are marked, will turn frosted ice into water. And I originally, in the alpha version of this map, I just had Frostwalker as an enchant that people could randomly get, and so they'd have to be wearing the boots and then happen to cross by this place in order to find it. I later came up with the idea of having all the skeletons and zombies in this area. This is the only place I do things with custom mobs. I change the mobs so that they actually get the Frostwalker boots, so that people only encounter Frostwalker boots in this section of the map, and they encounter it with all of the mobs in this section of the map, so that hopefully that will make people curious. And that, coupled with the fact that the proximity glass detector or whatever is bringing people here and they can't find an obvious loot chest, hopefully they'll be wandering around and encounter a bunch of these mobs and finally find this loot chest. So that is something that's a whole lot of fun. Yeah. And while most of the map is a traditional CTM map where the goal is to, kill monsters and defeat bad guys in order to find the loot, occasionally there's, I don't know if you call that a puzzle necessarily, but I guess I like to call them secrets. Just things that are fun, things that when you find it, you go, oh, wow, that was fun. That was a cool thing to find. You feel good about yourself for having figured out how to discover it. And that was my favorite one of the bunch. And I had to wait for months and months and months before I finally got to see someone actually discover that chest. That previous hidden loot chest in the swamp used command blocks. I don't use a lot of command blocks in this map, but there are a number of commands. Most of them are down here at spawn. And while it is possible to use command blocks for all kinds of interesting combat mechanics and different things, again, I use them mostly just for things related to utility and exploration. And so there are some command blocks to detect when you get the monument blocks and put them on the monument so it can play a fireworks sound and play fireworks when you finally complete the monument. So that's, I think, 3 of the chains over here. There are commands that run the daylight cycle so that when you're at spawn, it's daytime, and when you go outside the spawn region, it turns nighttime. And that also affects the local difficulty. What other command blocks are down here? There's commands that do things like the giving you night vision when you're holding the infinitely seeing eye. And so that's another example of one of the commands the command blocks is doing. And that also runs the divining rod proximity detector to find the hidden chest, as well as the loot finder. Yeah, so things like the mysterious divining rod. There's actually a whole lot of command blocks implemented just for this one thing, whose only purpose is to direct you to one location in the map. And in addition to the command blocks, you may have already seen this when I've been flying around before. It'll actually, let me fly over to the actual location of this thing. It'll be easier to see. So just as a reminder, basically the divining rod makes it so that it leads you to the point on the mountaintop where you dig down and you find the chest that I'd already dug up in a previous episode, and tells you to dig here atop the mountain. And if I go and give myself some night vision again really quick and go and fly down through the bottom of the map, we can get a sense of how it's implemented, which is there's a whole bunch of different colors of stained glass down here at the very bottom of the map, below the bedrock, as well as stained hardened clay. And each color corresponds to a different direction, effectively, in terms of how much rotation the player should see on the divining rod. And so if we're somewhere over here, basically there's command blocks that use execute, detect, and look and say, oh, we're in the pink area of the stained glass. And so the pink means that it should be facing, 30 degrees this way or whatever. And so depending upon which stained glass you're in, it will point you slightly further to the left or to the right, and then put down these title commands, which just add some text on the screen, which points you in that direction. And it ends up being a whole lot of command blocks because you have to figure out the rotation of the player and which color thing that they're in, and then do some math, and then figure out which bit of text that has the arrows pointing in the right direction in order to get you in the right direction. It's a whole big thing. And so it ends up being a whole lot of command blocks. But that's how that's implemented. And then obviously the loot finder, the thing that tells you, cold, warm, very warm, hot, in order to find all the different loot chests, is also implemented with a ton of command blocks that go and detect armor stands that are located in the same location as the loot chests. And so just as we saw with the dig in the swamp, In addition to having armor stands there, there's also hidden invisible armor stands inside all the loot chests, and so I can detect any nearby ones near to the player and detect how far away they are, and as a result tell the proximity thing to, say cold or warm or hot, depending upon how far away the nearest one is. That's a color that you haven't already obtained, and yeah, there's 16 colors and 4 different distances away you could be from the nearest one, and so that ends up being a whole lot of different command blocks down there just to run that. And so while there are a lot of command blocks under here at spawn, I don't remember how many there are, there's a few hundred, it's still the case that there's only 5 or 6 different things I'm actually using the command blocks for. And so I tried very hard not to go overboard with commands, but at the same time, like, command programming is something I'm good at, and so in future versions of the map or future maps, I could imagine using more command block kind of procedures to do interesting things, because there's a lot of interesting things that you can do, and it's just a matter of doing them well in a way that it doesn't kind of, I don't know, overwhelm the map. I still want it to be Minecraft, but it's fun to have little extra things that people aren't expecting. Finally, I just want to talk about some of the changes that have happened to the map over time. It used to be the case in, for example, the version I played with Kurt, that the green beacon didn't have a monument block, and the first monument block was in the red beacon, and the second monument block was in the Mountain Peak dungeon, and the final one was in the purple beacon. And I changed it so the first monument block is in green, the second one is in red, there's no monument block in the mountain, and the final one's in purple for a couple of reasons. One is, originally, the way it was in the map with Kurt, you have to play through half the map before you get your first monument block, and then the second half of the map seems to go very quickly, so it just kind of made the pace of the monument blocks better and didn't make you feel like you're playing for 3 hours and you haven't even gotten the first monument block on the mini CTM. And the other reason is just kind of makes things more uniform. It ends up being all the different color beacons are the places that you get the different monument blocks, and so it's just kind of more uniform from that point of view as well. And finally, the Mountain Peak, I don't know, I talked about the fact that this dungeon is maybe a little easy for when it comes late in the map and the player has good gear, and it's kind of an optional dungeon. It leads you to Elytra and helps you find the purple beacon, but you don't absolutely need those things. And so having it not have a monument block to make it kind of completely optional as a dungeon is a good thing. And because it was a little bit easier, it doesn't seem like it kind of deserved a monument block necessarily. So I think those are a good change that I made to the timing of the monument blocks in the map. The teleporters evolved a lot throughout the course of the map because I kept having to make them more and more discoverable because people were never finding them. And so nowadays, there's a lot of things that try to make them discoverable. There's a lot of places that you'll encounter path blocks that kind of seem to be leading somewhere and occasionally have arrows on the ground that are pointing in a particular direction. And if you follow those arrows, they will eventually lead you to a teleporter. And there's actually those path blocks going out in 8 different directions and all 8 cardinal directions, north, northeast, south, southeast, from each teleporter to try to lead you to them. In some terrain, it's harder to see a long way compared to others, and so another thing that I've done with the teleporters is, for example, if they're cutting through a forest, I remove all of the trees in the forest that might be otherwise covering up the path blocks to make the path blocks more visible, and so that when people do see the arrows, they can just kind of follow the path without having to get lost in the trees on their way over to the teleporter. And it's also the case that no matter kind of what biome or what stuff you're traveling through, there's always path blocks. And so they're not extremely visible here. They're a bit more visible perhaps if I'm using night vision. But for example, there's an occasional path block that is dirt turned into a path block. But even underwater, there's underwater ice blocks. And over here, there is some sand under the water that's turned into clay. No matter what type of block is kind of on the surface of the world, there's always some corresponding path block that I change those blocks into in order to lead to the teleporter. When you find the hidden loot chest on top of the mountain as a result of the mysterious divining rod, originally along with the Elytra wings, rather than having the jump boost boots, I instead had a stack of splash jump boost potions. Potions don't normally stack, but as map makers, you can kind of trick Minecraft into putting potions in a stack. However, if you move the potions around in your inventory or drop them on the ground, they unstack. And I saw lots of Let's Play playthroughs where people accidentally unstack the potions, and then things are a gigantic mess. And so I decided to change things to have a command block that while you're wearing the boots, it gives you jump boost. That causes you to jump high in the air. And that was definitely a good improvement. It made it so that people didn't have to deal with the messy potions. It was easier to see exactly when you had the jump boost and when the jump boost was going to wear off. Because with the potions, like I think I had them last like 5 or 10 seconds. But sometimes you might have taken a potion and then you tried to do a jump and then did a second jump and the jump boost might wear off and you'd hit the ground and take a bunch of damage. It also gave me a piece of armor that I could add feather falling to make it less likely that people would die of fall damage while they were jumping high into the air and trying to fly with Elytra. And so that was a change that was made as the result of watching people play the map and realizing that I had done something suboptimal. When Kurt and I played the map, we had to, I think we spent like 2.5 episodes doing some caving around spawn before we finally went out to a green beacon because we didn't manage to find a dungeon underground that would give us the little breadcrumbs book that told us to go looking for a green beacon, and we'd already seen them away from spawn. And so I turned up the dungeon rate in the Minecraft, terrain generator settings. In this world, I think it used to be 35, and I've turned it up in the May maps up to 50. It makes the dungeons more frequent, but really it's just a matter of I want people to do some caving, but I want them to definitely find a dungeon, so they'll have one of those books that'll send them on a quest to find the green beacon. I think it would be better to have kind of a lower dungeon rate, but I don't know how to do that and make it reasonably assured that the player is actually going to find a dungeon in a reasonable amount of time from the start of the map so that they kind of know what to do next. And so there's kind of a trade-off there. If you played both the March maps and the May maps, you may have felt that the dungeons were a little bit too common, and I think they are a little bit too common, but I think it's better to have them be too common than to have them be too rare. And in the case of Kurt and I's playthrough, they were kind of too rare, and we spent a lot of time gearing up, and Kurt wasn't sure exactly what to do next because there wasn't any instructions yet because we hadn't found the dungeon. In a map like this, it's easy to always be kind of tweaking the difficulty as you see what people do playing the map in various Let's Plays. The green dungeon, I think, has always been doing pretty well. The red dungeon in the March versions was a little bit too hard, and so I've made it a little bit easier now in the May versions of the map. And the Mountain Peak dungeon back in the March version was a little bit too easy, and so I've made it a little bit harder in the May version of the maps. But it's still the case that as a result of the fact that it's random generation, and there's a lot of randomness associated with where and what type of spawners get placed on the map, it's always the case that some are going to be easier than others, and even for something like the green beacon, back in the March version of the maps, it was the case that sometimes like some green beacons would have 3 times as many spawners as others, which was not intended, but I just had way too much variability with the randomization I was using. And so I've done some things to rein it in so that the green beacon paths are now very similar lengths with very similar numbers of spawners. So it's not the case that there's one super easy green beacon and on a different portion of the map there's a super difficult one, because that is not what I intended to do. But with anything with randomization and heuristics, it's always the case that you do a lot of tweaking and don't necessarily always get things perfect, but just try to hone in on what it is that you're going for. When I was talking about the command blocks, one other thing that I haven't talked about in the dev commentary here is the Silverfish limiter. It was something I actually implemented as a result of watching people play on low-end computers and being in the green or purple dungeon and being overwhelmed by Silverfish, especially in the purple dungeon where there are witches. Sometimes witches get in a fight where 2 witches are fighting each other and they're throwing poison potions at each other. And if a silverfish gets caught in the crossfire, the silverfish gets hit by the poison potion, and then the silverfish calls for help and calls for help and calls for help, and you end up with tons and tons of silverfish. And the more entities you have, the more it lags out the game, and it's just not super fun to play. And so now there's a Silverfish limiter where basically anytime there's at least 20 silverfish in the world in a single player game. Any new silverfish that the silverfish call for help immediately get teleported into the void below the world, so you don't have to deal with more silverfish. And it's basically just a way to limit the silverfish, both to help people on low-end machines cope, as well as to make it so it's not completely unfair when a witch throws a potion and it hits a silverfish and gets caught in the crossfire and causes kind of a silverfish apocalypse. And finally, even though I like silverfish a lot, and I think that they're a very cool aspect of this map, both from the very beginning, when people think they're about to get their first piece of stone, and then they find out that it's silverfish, as well as just making all of the underground more challenging, especially whenever a creeper blows up and might wake up some of the silverfish. I like that mechanic a lot. But silverfish can get overwhelming, and so I think it's better to have the silverfish limiter because it still makes silverfish dangerous, but it makes them not as completely unfun as they sometimes were in the March versions of the maps, where people had, like 50 silverfish chasing them around a cave system, and it was just overwhelming. In these videos, I've talked about a lot of different design aspects of vanilla Swirl CTM to try to explain my rationale of what I was going for and how I made decisions in different parts of the map. I would also like to do some videos where I talk about the implementation and the programming that I did in order to actually make the map a reality, but that will be in some future videos. For now, I will say I hope, as always, that you guys are having a great day, and I hope that you enjoyed all of my ramblings talking about the design of this map. Bye-bye.